IB Nation, what's going on? It's Notre Dame Recruiting Hour here on a Monday afternoon discussing the latest topics in Notre Dame recruiting. I am the director of recruiting here. I just said recruiting like 17 times in my three sentences there, by the way. But Ryan Roberts, director of recruiting here at irishbreakdown.com, joined by Sean Davis, who is a recruiting analyst here at the site as well. Bringing you the latest in recruiting. Like I said, we got a lot to talk about today. If anybody doesn't follow along with recruiting too in-depthly, we have coaches on the road last week. There'll be more every single day. They'll be grinding away, including Brian Mason got to spend the whole week in Hawaii last week, Sean, which is another conversation for another day, and fantastic for Coach Mason. He deserves it after the season that he just put together. But we got coaches grinding on the road. Main topic that we want to start with today is Justin Scott, five-star defensive tackle out of St. Ignatius in Chicago, Illinois, is nearing his college decision, announcing on the 31st. And he has a final visit coming up soon here to the University of Notre Dame right before the decision being made. So we'll kick off with that. But then the bulk of this show, before we get to the mailbag at the end, is going to be to not celebrate the Justin Scotts of the world, because everyone knows about Justin Scott. He's fantastic. We don't have to tell you all about him. Next two shows, we wanted to give some time to some of the underrated recruits on the trail for the 2024 recruiting class and players that Notre Dame is specifically visiting or has offered or has interest in. So we're going to highlight some of those key players because, I mean, if you look at what Notre Dame staff did this past week, Sean, there was a lot of offers that got put on the table. Lot, man. And some guys, you're like, okay, you look at the recruiting rankings and the offer list, you're like, okay, top 100 kids, got Alabama, Georgia, all those dudes, right? Like, makes sense. But there are some players that they're adding that all still have really nice offer lists, but aren't highly rated from a recruiting ranking perspective. So we're here to shine some light on some of those players, some guys that are due for some big rises in the recruiting ranking and guys that you need to get on your radar, because don't just look at the recruiting rankings. And I'm here to tell you, Notre Dame is finding gems. So you think about last cycle, what they did with finding guys like Brandon Hillman, Caleb Smith. They found some diamonds in the rough down the stretch that they really like. And there are several players that I think Notre Dame has already identified in the 2024 class. And this is going to be the defensive segment of the underrated recruits in 2024. But Sean, we got to get kicked off with the main news that everybody wants to talk about, and for good reason. And I completely understand it, right? On January 31st, which is Tuesday of next week, Justin Scott, 2024 defensive tackle out of St. Ignatius in the city of Chicago, is making his commitments. He released, what was it, a top 8, I think, was what he originally had, right, Sean? He had guys like Alabama, Colorado. I know Georgia just offered recently. Michigan's a big player for him. And Notre Dame is as a chance to close this one out on a player that they need. And they don't need just because he's a Chicago kid, Catholic school, 5-star, right? It's also the fact that Notre Dame needs to continue to add size on the interior of their defensive line, and adding 6'5", 310 pounds that could probably still hold another 20, 30 pounds on his frame of playmaking potential is big time potentially for the Notre Dame 2024 class. And Sean, I know that you have obviously developed a great relationship with Justin throughout this process. So he has some news that he is now visiting Notre Dame. He was supposed to visit this past weekend. That was the tentative plan early. But now he's visiting on the 29th, which is this Sunday coming up. So, Sean, let me ask you, man, just to start this conversation off, because we'll talk a lot about Justin Scott if he commits to Notre Dame on what that impact is for the Irish and the 2024 class and all that great stuff. And I know someone asked about it in the mailbag already, so we'll talk about that as well. And yes, you can throw those mailbags in. I just saw Milton fans question in the chat. Throw the mailbags anytime. Put the MB in the front. It really does help me. I'll start those things up. We'll get them at the end of the show. But Sean, it's going to be really interesting because we have felt good about where Notre Dame is with Justin Scott, obviously coming into this one. Moves his visit, though, from this weekend to 2 days before the decision. To open up the conversation, what are your initial thoughts on him moving it to next weekend? And is this positive, I guess, for the Notre Dame program to start off with?
I just want to make sure. That's what I take from it. I think, when everyone was kind of wondering why man, why did he delete that tweet? What's going on? I think when I spoke to him prior to that weekend, that was on Sunday. I had spoken to him that Friday and Saturday. He was very confident that number one, whatever happened with Notre Dame was very much important to him and huge for him. Two, he was close, very close to knowing what he wanted to do, and pretty much intimated that to me like, yeah, I pretty much know, still thinking, but I pretty much know, which leads me to believe that absolutely, anytime you get an offer from the two-time defending champions that consistently develop big-time defensive tackles and send them to the NFL high in the draft, it gives you something to think about.
Yeah.
But in the midst of that, not only on Lucky Lefty podcast, but last Monday, I said nothing has changed.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing has changed with this young man. Nothing has changed. And just because he deleted that doesn't mean that he's not going to still do it on the 31st. And lo and behold, here we are with, information coming out, sources that we have, and also some other publications, reporting things. It's pretty much what we said last Monday.
Yep.
Nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed is that Tommy Rees and Al Washington were at his game on Friday. Now he's visiting.
Yep.
That's it. That's the only thing that's changed. And the visit is pretty much, I think I know what I'm going to do, but I want to make sure. I want to make sure. And yeah, I probably should get down there and visit before I make sure. That was a real push. I have I forget the young man's name. A young man that's actually a big time tackle prospect, not Power 5, but Division One at Brother Rice in Chicago that attends my church. And his teammate, that was a defensive tackle this year, actually just signed with Michigan. And we're having this discussion. And he was telling me yesterday, like, yo, St. Ignatius is on our schedule next year. And he's like, yo, I get to go up against big boy. And I'm like, yeah, have fun with that because you're a tackle. And usually you wouldn't face him, but now they play that 3-3-5. So more than likely you're going to have to battle him. And we're just talking. He was like, man, where do you think he's going? I shared my opinion. And he was like, man, Michigan was here in December when they came to Brother Rice. They went to Ignatius the same day. I said, yeah, I know Harbaugh and Michigan. They made a really strong push and made a great impression with the young man.
Yep.
And I think he was very transparent and honest with me about that. And I think he was waiting for that same type of push. Because Notre Dame was always going to be a finalist. And I'm not talking, when I say finalist, I'm not talking about top 8. I'm talking about when the final list comes out, when it's like top 3, top 4, Notre Dame was going to be in that mix. And they weren't going to be 3 or 4. I'll leave it at that.
Right.
So when you get what you got that Friday, that was huge for him. And then you follow that up with another Friday visit.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden he reacts from that and goes down to South Bend or sets up a visit for this weekend, which works out better that he did not visit this weekend. I think the inclement weather in the area had a lot to do with the change and it kind of being last minute from, conversation Friday after the game, Sunday, let's not force it, wait a week, we'll get down there before the announcement. And so in doing that, it works out better because then you saw all the 24 recruits, tweeting out like, oh, I think I'm free that weekend.
Yes.
I think I'm free that weekend too.
CJ
right?
Carr, Carson
Absolutely.
Hobbs. Yeah, they're all doing
Right,
it. Yep.
right. So whereas originally it just would have been him.
Right.
Which, he would have had all of the attention, probably still would have had a great time. But now they get to really put on the show with the recruits. So everything is trending in the right direction, which is why, last week we said, yo, relax, nothing's changed. Don't overreact to a tweet. Let things play out. And so Notre Dame fans should feel really good about what's coming on the 31st.
Yeah, and I applaud you and Brian especially for kind of keeping the board updated. If you're not signed up at boards.irishbreakdown.com, by the way, you should, as I'm going to get our banner up here in a second, because Sean and Brian had this thing covered. Because again, there were initial reports, and this was coming from Justin, right, from his side. So it wasn't like it was someone making stuff up or anything like that, right? Like, it wasn't a bad report. It was just people kind of took it as like everything was solidified. Justin was definitely going to come this past weekend. It was done in the books. And Sean and Brian kind of let everybody know on the board that, like, hey, this is what is going to happen most likely, but there's still some things that needs to get figured out. Because like Sean said, you know, got inclement weather, you have a little bit of travel. I know it's only an hour and a half from Chicago, but still, you know, it's still a 17-year-old kid that needs to make that travel, right?
Yeah.
So there were still things that needed to be figured out, obviously. And honestly, Sean, I think I agree wholeheartedly with you in the fact that I think it sets up perfectly for Notre Dame. I really do. Because you talk about, if it was this past weekend, for instance, right? Coaches are still out on the road all this weekend, right? So even if it went fantastic this past weekend, you're going to still have a lot of schools coming in to see Justin Scott this week in school at St. Ignatius. Well, not see him, but see his coach, his staff, and parlay their message and all that stuff, right? And then also, that leaves next weekend open if Justin did want to go somewhere else to check out, right? But you get the last crack at it. You get the final pitch to Justin Scott that, like, hey, man, you know you want to be here. We want you here, obviously. Let's make this thing happen. You got an opportunity to close the deal in person, which I think is fantastic, only 2 days away. And like you said, I shouldn't be surprised that, you know, the minute that a 5-star's come into town, that CJ Carr and the boys are all just like, yep, I'll be there on Sunday, which is really hysterical, Sean, because I don't know if you saw the madness on the board when CJ Carr was on the campus of the University of Washington this past weekend because he was at a 7-on-7 competition. Let's flip it to Washington, Sean.
You know what I like? CJ Carr is a troll, and I like it.
He is a little bit of a troll.
He's a little bit of a troll, and I like it. That lets me know he has personality, but it also lets me know what type of dude he's going to be in that huddle. And I like that. I like that. Somebody that can be in the midst of chaos and big moments and can make you laugh. The type of dude that will be 96 yards from winning a Super Bowl and look over and say, yo, is that John Candy in the stand?
Yes.
That Joe Montana type vibe. So that's who CJ Carr is. He is a jokester.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's the perfect way to put it. There's a calmness, kind of playfulness to CJ Carr, right? Because we've obviously both had the chance to talk to him a little bit. He was on the live show after he committed to the University of Notre Dame too, as well, several months ago now. So I think that getting all the reinforcements on campus, getting the opportunity for Justin to see everyone in person one final time, getting the parents on campus as well again, like it's setting up to be very good for Notre Dame. At the end of the day, you still have, 8 days until he's making a commitment, right? So Notre Dame still has to close this thing, right? Like, they can't blunder this. I should say there is a possibility to blunder it. Like, it can happen, right? If the visit goes terrible, but we don't foresee that happening, right? Yeah. Notre Dame has a chance to close this thing out. Let's go close it out, baby. That's all it comes down to.
Oh, we can make it sound so simple. You make it sound so simple, Ryan.
I mean, I try, man. I try. I mean, I'm just saying, man, because Sean, this is one of those things, right? Where I think we hear sometimes, oh, they got to close the deal, and it's closing a deal for a player that doesn't. Let me phrase this the best way I can. That there are some things stacked against you with this recruitment, right? Whether it's like a kid that's from somewhere far away, for geographically, or maybe he's a kid that, is just kind of half in, half out. But Justin Scott's a kid, right? That everything about him, Sean, says Notre Dame football. Every single thing about him. He meets a need. He's a Chicago kid. He's really well-spoken and very honest and mature, and there's nothing about him that tells me you should not be at Notre Dame, right? Like, there's nothing about him. High academic kid, comes from a really good family. From everything that you've told me, he's loved in the city of Chicago at St. Ignatius. Like, nothing about Justin Scott says you should not be at Notre Dame, right? And like you said, I mean, Georgia just put 2 defensive tackles in the first round last year. Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt. They're going to have one that's going to get drafted in the top 3 or 4 picks this year in Jalen Carter. They are producing defensive tackles at the volume at the highest level.
Yeah.
So them coming in, I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't like take one step back and be like, oh, that gives them something to think about. Like, let's be honest, it is.
Yeah.
Because as much of Notre Dame lovers as we are here and in the chat, you can't tell me if you're a big time defensive tackle who wants to make it to the NFL eventually. Like, let's be honest, Justin Scott wants to go to the NFL, right? Even if you love Notre Dame with all your being, if a school that has just won 2 straight national championships and is producing defensive linemen the way Georgia comes in and offers you, it makes the pitch, you'd be lying if you say that wouldn't be a little bit enticing. Just a little bit, right? I mean,
they just walk in with film from the second quarter. Like, you see the two, you see Wyatt, you see Jordan Davis, you see him, you see Jalen Carter going top 5 this year. Hey, did you see Bear against TCU? The next one? Yeah. That, and then we got you coming after him. It's like the sales pitch is almost similar to what Harry Easton can say to offensive linemen.
Yes.
And you have to be able to, if we're going to be happy about what we can do in the form of Harry Easton, we have to take what other programs can do against us when they're great in a certain position. And Georgia just happens to be great in that position. So, for me, this is something that you haven't had the pleasure of, and Brian hasn't had the pleasure of knowing the young man and speaking to him face to face and getting an opportunity to read who he is. This is why a long time ago I say he's a 5-star, but this is not the type of dude that's for the dramatics. He's not a diva, and he's not like other 5-stars. And what the people that surround him are totally different than the people that surrounded Keon Keeley. So all of the drama that might have come with him or might have come with Peyton Bowen, you're not getting that. This is a young man that's looking for an honest conversation about coaching, development, culture, and education. And this is what the people surrounding him are focused on. And that's what he pointed out in his example of what has stood out in his recruitment.
No doubt.
And so that lets you know, like, I'm sure Notre Dame fans will still be uneasy because it's a long way to December, whatever National Signing Day ends up being. But I think he's going to be the very thing that CJ Carr is asking him to be.
Right.
Come be the defensive leader on the recruiting trail. He's going to be that wholeheartedly. If he signs with Notre Dame, watch out. Because him talking to other people definitely will lead to some big time players being interested. We'll get into that in the mailbag.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and Sean, it's a great conversation piece because you have pillars on the offensive class for Notre Dame right now. What's a better pillar and leader than having your potential 5-star quarterback in the class in CJ Carr, right? You have Cam Williams, who's a top 20 player nationally on one recruiting service and very well spoken and very forthcoming with his want to build a great class. But on the defensive side of the ball for 2024, you have Owen Wafel, who's a very soft-spoken kid in New Jersey, right? It's very soft-spoken. You have Carson Hobbs, who has a great personality, but the recruiting rank can say right now he's a 3-star, even though I think it's ridiculous that he's a 3-star. Justin Scott would quickly represent the pillar of the defensive recruiting class for Notre Dame that really isn't there right now. No defensive recruit right now has the personality, the reputation, the rankings. Like, they don't all have that together, right? Justin Scott does. So he would present a tremendous opportunity. Let's hope that Notre Dame's able to close the deal, but they appear in very good position as of right now. So that's the latest on Justin Scott visiting this Sunday, January 29th, is making his decision between several great schools, including Notre Dame, on the 31st, which is his birthday. So is he turning 17 or 18? Is he a young cat?
17.
He's turning 17? Yeah. Oh, man, he's young, too. That's wild.
We might have to pray for Mike Mickens, bro.
Why? What's that? Why?
Because if he gets Jaden Mickey's mouth and Carson Hobbs' mouth in that room at the same time, film study should be pretty pretty fun, and getting them to calm down on the field should be pretty fun.
I mean, you didn't even throw Christian Gray in that conversation too, my friend.
You're right. And Mike Mickens is getting some good players, but he's bringing in some talkers too.
Oh man, boy is he. But it's, again, you're bringing in but Sean, that's what's been missing a little bit from Notre Dame, man. I talked about this a whole lot this past year, man.
I agree.
Like you need some swagger.
Yeah,
you need some swagger out there. And those three kids bring swagger to the field. So
absolutely.
Hey man, bring more of that. As long as they back it up with their play, bring more of it. Bring more of it. I'm down for it. So that's the latest with Justin Scott. We're going to get into our main topic of the day, which, again, we're going to talk about some underrated defensive recruits that Notre Dame has shown interest in, either offering, visiting, pushing for in the 2024 recruiting class. So we'll get to that next. Please hit that like button, subscribe, notification bell, all that great stuff. Sign up for the boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com because we'll have a lot more intel during the week from the recruiting perspective, from team perspective, as we move closer to spring practice, all that great stuff. So hit that like button, hit that notification bell. All right, Sean. So this is one that I am really, really excited about because, one, we get to highlight some players that need more attention, right? From the Notre Dame perspective, they need it. And also, we get to pop up some film, man, and watch a little bit of film of some of these really underrated players. I also have a nice little interview for you guys coming up shortly here as well. So we have picked 6 players that are on Notre Dame's radar. I believe 5 of them already have an offer from the University of Notre Dame. 1 does not yet, but they are out visiting him today at his high school. So we're going to be taking a look at some of the underrated defensive recruits that Notre Dame has a close eye on. So, Sean, I want to start off with a young man. Very interesting backstory. Very interesting. I've had several pieces on him already. And if you want to go to irishbreakdown.com, and search my name or search his name, you'll be able to find some information on DeMello Jones, Sean, who is I'm just going to call him an athlete for now, okay? He's an athlete out of Swainsboro High School in the state of Georgia. Currently rated, Sean. He finally got on 247's ranking system, man. 3-star recruit. No other service has him ranked yet, okay? Offer list, though. Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, basically every team in the SEC. He's got a nice little list, man. Notre Dame offered him a few weeks ago. Also, the nephew of former Notre Dame safety Deke Cooper, who I know was a very good player for Notre Dame in the late 90s, heavy-hitting safety, and played in the NFL for a few years. So Deke actually lives in Atlanta, Georgia now. So him and DeMello have a very good reputation. And we'll get into DeMello's background of his recruitment a little bit, Sean, but I just want to highlight this young man. And we're going to show a little bit of film on DeMello as well as we talk through him because he's a really interesting cat, Sean. So the film is going to be going as we're going to be kind of talking. We're not as much dissecting the film as we're going to kind of let the film roll. And if there's things that we see that we want to point out, we're going to do it throughout this show. So this is DeMello Jones. Again, athletes out of the Swainsboro High School. Sean, depending on what school he's being courted by, because again, he's got offers from Alabama, Georgia's of the world, Ohio State just offered him recently. Some teams like him at safety, like Notre Dame does. Some like him at cornerback, apparently, which I was semi-surprised to hear. And then other schools are recruiting him as an athlete. He can play on the offensive or defensive side of the ball. And I think you see that, Sean, on film here, man. He's playing a lot of wildcat quarterback, playing some running back. Look at this breakaway speed right here. Look at this acceleration, playing running back out of the backfield. Just Notre Dame needs this cat, man. Needs this type of player.
Yeah, when I watched this film last night, one of the things that I wrote down, the first thing I wrote down was his range and his athleticism. So if you see that, I see why Notre Dame projects him, to safety. As you look at his length and you project him getting bigger and growing and getting stronger, you look at his stride. His stride is a long strider. He might not be fast as far as 4.4, but his stride allows him to play faster than most people might think he is. And that's maybe why he starts out at a 3-star. But I think as he moves up and you watch more of his film and you start to see how productive he is and how many big-time plays he makes how explosive he is, especially offensively, you start to see it's not about the stopwatch. Like this dude is rangy. Like he
Yes.
makes up a lot of ground really quickly, and that's because of his combination of athleticism along with his length and his size. So I think the projection to safety is really good. Now, schools that want him as a cornerback, I'm with you on that. Like, I don't know. And
I,
then, but
I,
go
I just
ahead.
don't I just don't know if he has I don't know if I would say that he has like incredible short area change of direction, right? Like I think it's okay. I think it's
Yeah.
solid, but as a safety with the speed explosiveness he has and the length combined with the fact that he does play some man to man at his school, obviously playing a little bit of corner. This kid I think is a scheme diverse
Hmm.
alignment diverse safety, man. Like he could be a true free, could be a true strong safety, which in Notre Dame system, field or boundary, right? This kid can do a lot of things. I mean, look at that break on the football right there. That's impressive stuff, man. And Sean, like it's so funny, man. When Notre Dame offered him, he already had offers from Alabama and Georgia. He literally wasn't ranked on any recruiting platform. He was a 0-star recruit, 0 stars. And here he is now with all the best of the SEC with Notre Dame a lot of players or a lot of people are coming after him, and Ohio State just offered him as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if Ohio State likes him on the offensive side of the football because this kid, as a junior, ran for 1,200 yards as like this Wildcat quarterback on only 120 something carries. He averaged 10 and a half yards a carry this year as a junior, on top of averaging like 27 yards per reception as well out of the backfield. So this kid is an all-around dynamo. And I love that Mel Fan just put this on here because he can. 6'1", 175 pounds, obviously still needs to fill out. But my dude can also hit, man. He comes up with violence. He comes up with balance. And DeMello Jones, for me, is a player where I don't care what his recruiting ranking is. Because right now, the safety recruiting, a lot of great names on the board. Who are the real targets? I think that we can kind of, we're going to deduce a little bit more as we look forward. But I've been told from sources that DeMello Jones is someone that Notre Dame is very high on. Okay, so throw the ranking out of the building here for a second. I don't care about that stuff. If you watch that film and you come away not impressed in some area, I don't understand why 100%. Be very honest, right? So I think that there is a lot to like here. And I know people are asking already. So, Sean, let's do this because then we have a nice little surprise after this. But Charlie Weiss's last but Luke just said, Ryan, do you see it being a long shot or too soon to tell? Charlie, so he wants to make a decision at the right before senior year or maybe early portion of senior year. It's kind of up in the air a little bit. I think Notre Dame has an absolute shot with him. I think they do, right? It's at the end of the day, SEC schools are SEC schools are going to make a big run at him, right? They are. He's right in Georgia. But the relationship with his uncle is big. I'm just here to tell you. Again, his uncle is Deke Cooper that played at Notre Dame. He is very aware of Notre Dame. One of the quotes that I had with him in an interview recently is he said almost word for word, if my uncle can make it there and make an impact, I know I can, right? And there's something to that. And he's planning on getting to Notre Dame very shortly, has never been on campus before. If they get him on campus, I think that is a needle mover potentially for DeMello Jones. So really good kid, exciting football player, Sean. And we have a little bit of a surprise for everybody out there. But is there any last thing you want to say about DeMello, Sean? Oh,
I'm right there with you, Double R. Sorry about that, guys. I'm
you're
right
good.
there with you on this recruitment. I think Notre Dame is right in there for the long haul, and it's good to hear that he wants to make a decision before his senior year starts. Do your due diligence. Of course, it's SEC country, but Deke Cooper and the connection to Notre Dame, I expect it to be pretty strong. I fully
Yes.
expect it to be pretty strong. And that's he reminds. I got excited because when you sent over his name, and I'm like, I started thinking about Brandon Hillman and the upside I think Brandon Hillman has when I'm watching his film. And I'm like, okay, if these are the type of guys that we're going after, specifically in the safety on the back
Yep.
end, I like the direction that Chris O'Leary is taking, if that indeed is the case.
That's a good one, Sean. I'd say that there's a lot of similarities between him and Hillman, except I think that DeMello is even more athletic than Brandon Hillman. Like Brandon Hillman's a good athlete, explosive, no doubt,
Mhm.
but DeMello Jones is just a little faster, in my opinion. He's got a little more range, but it's a good comparison because they both play more Wildcat quarterback, I should say, than anything else at their level. So a very exciting player, but I don't want to just give you guys my opinion on the recruitment, okay? I don't want to just do that because we here at Irish Breakdown, as you all know, I hope at this point, we try to give you as much information as possible. I hope that you know that. So who better to hear from about DeMello Jones recruitment, Sean, than DeMello Jones? So got to sit down with him recently in an interview. Here is DeMello Jones, athlete out of Swainsboro High School, 2024 recruit. Sorry, folks. Let's try to get this going. Breakdown podcast welcoming top safety target for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in 2024. Got Mr. DeMello Jones, who is a safety out of Swainsboro High School in Georgia. Really appreciate DeMello for copping on for me with a few minutes here because I know it's incredibly busy. It's the off season, but the coaches I know have been going through every single day. There's a lot of calls, a lot of texts right now. DeMello, I guess just enjoying the off season a little bit, man. What have you been up to, and just how's the recruiting chaos been for you so far?
Well, now, man, basketball season, been hooping, keeping up with my football stuff too. A bunch of coaches hitting me up, texting me, coming down to see me. So it's been like crazy.
Awesome, man. Well, I've seen. I think I saw a little bit of your highlights, but how's the basketball game, man? I know you got a lot of skills on the football field. How's the basketball skills for you?
So last game I had 24 points, and I averaged around like 15 a game.
Nice. So, all right, awesome, man. So you're staying in shape. Are you also outside of the winter sport? Do you run track or anything in the spring? Like, what's kind of that situation?
Yes, sir. I also run track.
Nice. So well-rounded, man. They got you busy in every single season, right? There's no off time, which is awesome. And I know there's no off season right now from recruiting and everything, DeMello, but I really wanted to kind of paint this as a backstory because you're one of the more fascinating players, I think, on the board for Notre Dame right now and for a lot of schools. I mean, if people haven't been keeping track, I mean, you have offers from Georgia, Alabama. I just saw you got an offer from Ohio State, and you are one of the more dynamic athletes. I mean, I think you ran for over 1,200 yards, averaged like 10 yards a carry last year. You play safety. You can catch the football out of the backfield. You can do a little bit of everything, man. So I guess a good way to start here is with the recruiting side of things, your ability to play so many different positions, right? What has kind of been the message from some schools as far as what position they're potentially targeting you at? Because obviously Notre Dame, I know, is looking at you as a safety, but are some schools looking at you on offense, defense? What's that situation like?
So some schools are offering me for both sides. So they kind of like letting me have it. But I say most of them could recruit me for defense, and like Notre Dame was safety, a couple of them safety. But recently it's been cornerbacks too. So
nice.
Coaches like how I'm built for corner. So and they actually seen some tape of me playing corner. I'm a lockdown.
Yeah, no, I mean I saw it. One of the first highlights. I think one of the first highlights is it's you on the offensive side of the football, but then you're just kind of playing in some off coverage, playing cornerback and being able to break on the football. And you do a lot of things, obviously, on the field, DeMello. I know you just said that you're lockdown corner, but is there one spot that in particular you like to play more than the other, or are you just kind of comfortable everywhere?
I'm comfortable everywhere.
Love it. So a lot of schools are kind of looking at you on both sides of the ball, like you say. Is there a preference to maybe getting a shot on offense, or is it just, again, wherever you play is where you play?
Yeah, wherever I play is where I play. I mean, I like to do what I want to do, but I think I have like a better shot at the NFL on defensive side.
Sure. And I know that it's been, again, it's so funny because we were just joking before we started and you finally got ranked by one of the services. But again, when you got the offer from Notre Dame, I mean, I looked and you already had offers from Georgia, Alabama. So you had some big names obviously on the offer list already, but you were not ranked on any recruiting platform. Can you take me through maybe just a little bit of why you think that is? I mean, I'm still trying to figure out why exactly the ranking doesn't match what the offer list is yet.
So actually, I would say I blew up my 10th grade year. So my 10th grade year, I had a great year. A bunch of coaches coming in the spring, seeing me. But I actually blew up my 11th grade year. So I played like excellent. A lot of coaches were seeing me then, and I guess I was underrated, overlooked.
Yeah. Well, what has kind of the last like couple weeks been for you, man? Because obviously you're pulling in a lot of offers. I think you were up to number 20, I think was the latest offer that you got, right? So really starting to fill up quickly. We already talked a little bit about, coaches coming in to see you and everything, but maybe a couple of the things, just some of the latest things that you've been up to from the recruiting side of things.
It's been like a lot of schools trying to get me down to their campus. Like they're trying to get me to come see the campus, build relationships with all the coaches and stuff like that.
And are there any schools, and it doesn't have to be obviously pertinent to Notre Dame, but are there any schools that are sticking out to you early? Obviously, I know you're a Southeastern guy. I'm assuming some of the SEC schools are probably sticking out a little bit too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of them. It's really all of them.
Well, I know, again, you getting so many offers in such a short amount of time, man. It's like a crash course to keep getting it, right?
Crazy.
Yeah, and I know that you'll be setting up, obviously, a bunch of visits here pretty soon. But, DeMello, for Notre Dame fans specifically out there, you actually have a pretty cool relationship to the school as far as you have a relative that played. So maybe if you want to just talk a little bit about the family ties that you have to Notre Dame.
Well, so actually my uncles on my mother's side played at Notre Dame, and I don't know the exact years, but he played and graduated from there. I know it's a good school if he chose it. He went out to the NFL, and if he can coordinate with Notre Dame, I know I could too.
Yeah, well, I know, and that's Deke Cooper, who was a really good safety in the late '90s for Notre Dame, then played in the NFL for a little bit of time. LaMelo, I think that DeMello, I think that Deke still lives kind of close to you, right? And how is just the relationship that you guys have together?
So we actually do have like a close relationship still. It's like a close uncle. So I go up and visit a lot. He'll come down and visit. We talk football, basketball. So it's like a normal relationship.
Yeah. And I guess kind of centering on like the Notre Dame side of things a little bit, just kind of when you got that offer, man, what was that like? Obviously, a little bit about the program from your uncle and everything, but when you were finally able to get that offer from Notre Dame, what were just kind of the initial emotions and just, I guess, thoughts when that offer came?
It was really like crazy. He was surprised. I mean, like kind of surprised. It was like crazy to see that I had the same offer as him for the same position, for the same school, and I got it early.
Yeah,
So
and
he was really happy.
It's crazy how quickly this stuff happens too, man. Because I know people are probably hitting you up like, "Hey, man, what's the decision date?" Right? You're just kind of like, "Hey, man, I'm pulling in the offers right now," Well, DeMello, let me ask you this, because I know that this is obviously a big decision for you when ultimately you ever do, when you do make that ultimate decision of what college you want to go to. I know when we talked the first time, I think you said like sometime during your senior year would be kind of when you wanted to make some sort of decision. Let me ask you, like, when you're just picking a school, though, what are some things that are important to you? Like, what is the main criteria that you need to look for in order to know that you're making a great decision on the school?
First and foremost, do I like the school? Do I fit best for the school? So it's like, can I see myself playing here? Can I see myself going here, connecting with the people? I like to connect with more than just the coaches, like the players, the people at the facility, like the people that just be around and stuff like that.
Yeah. And obviously we have another football season left. Got a lot of visits going to be set up, I'm sure, some OVs, all that great stuff, man. I know that this is a incredibly busy time for you. How are you just kind of handling everything, though, DeMello, as far as, again, you're blowing up quick. There's a lot of offers coming in, like support system around you. Like, how are you kind of staying level-headed through so many coaches calling, being so busy constantly?
Well, I'm just not stressing about it. Just so I'm like, playing it cool. I know I can fit stuff into my schedule. So yeah, I'm just fitting into my schedule.
Awesome, man. Well, again, joined here by DeMello Jones, star safety out of Swainsboro High School, also being recruited on offense a little bit on both sides of the football at cornerback. Do it all. If you haven't watched his huddle tape, please go take a look. He's a fantastic football player. DeMello, I really appreciate you again, man. I know it's busy times, but thank you so much again for joining the Irish Breakdown podcast.
Thank you for having me.
All right, folks. So there is DeMello Jones. And of course, I've already shown you the huddle highlight tape. So you know what he brings to the table as a football player. Very impressive athlete. There's no doubt about it. So hopefully he has a great process, whether he ends up at Notre Dame or not. Great young man. I enjoyed having a conversation with him. I've enjoyed just having multiple conversations with him at this point. So that is DeMello Jones, safety out of Swainsboro High School in the state of Georgia. And that was just a little insight to him. And K-Mac, I appreciate that, man. We're trying to give you guys a little more insight. I have some more interviews that are going to be popping up here, populating the channel over the next few days. So that's DeMello Jones, though. And I want to move on to the rest of the list. And that leads me to the next player who I think you all should keep a close eye on, especially this weekend. Because I put out something on the board this morning that Leonard Moore, who is a defensive back out of Round Rock High School in the state of Texas. And we know, as Notre Dame fans, how important it is for Notre Dame to continue to really recruit high in the state of Texas. And Leonard Moore was a player that just got offered last week. I was told this morning, and I put it on the board already. Make sure to go to boards.irishbreakdown.com if you did not see that little bit of an intel, that he will be on campus this weekend on Sunday, the 29th, the same day that Justin Scott and some of the 2024 commits will be on campus. We expect more players to be on campus that day as well. It's not a junior day per se. It's just more some, another opportunity to get on campus for some recruits. So going to highlight this young man. I want to show you all a little bit of his highlight tape this past week because he was really impressive football player for Round Rock High School. So if Round Rock does sound familiar to you all, and it might, because there is a young man who comes from Round Rock in the 2023 class for Notre Dame, and that is Braylon James, wide receiver. Did not go to Round Rock High School, but he is from the same city. Went to a different school, obviously. They're out there, Stony Point High School, not Round Rock, but they are from the same town. And I see someone, Jay just put in the chat, he only allowed 3 receptions. So crazy stat line for Leonard Moore. So Leonard, as a junior, only got targeted 9 times. He had 3 interceptions, a bunch of pass breakups, and only allowed 3 receptions on the season, in the entire season, which is pretty nutty. So I'm going to share the screen here to get some film on for Leonard Moore, who again is a very impressive athlete in the state of Texas in the 2024 class. A recent offer for Notre Dame, so a player you should keep an eye on. Obviously, he is the long, athletic corner at the bottom of the screen, and I think the thing that you immediately see with Leonard Moore is that he is incredibly long, folks. Like the first time I saw him. Body type reminds me a little bit of Cam Hart. You see him in his stance right there. You just see his arms dangling by his side and just how lengthy he is. But the thing that really surprised me is I expected this stuff, right? He has the incredible length. He's got good ball skills. But the thing that really pops off to me is he is a pretty nice change of direction player, man. Like he's not just a long speed, have to play press man, cover 3 heavy stuff. This kid can change direction a little bit, which is very interesting for his size profile. Listed between 6'1 and 6'2, 175 pounds. So obviously he's lean right now. He'll have to gain a lot of weight at the next level. But you see right now, there's some pretty good quick twitch to him. Gets off of blocks well, but the length. I mean, guys, honestly, I was watching the film. I'm just like, this kid might have 33-inch arms. It's very possible because he is. I mean, you see it, and you see the willingness and the proactiveness to get in on the run. He has good eyes to be able to work again in run supports. A lot of good traits here with a guy like a Leonard Moore, who, again, is going to be visiting Notre Dame for the first time this Sunday after getting the offer last week. Same city as Braylon James, which is going to be interesting. And more importantly, he's from the state of Texas and a big-time athlete for the position. Another kid, though, that is only ranked as a 3-star recruit right now. And I'm having trouble understanding why exactly. I'm having trouble understanding why. Because for me, I see the length. I see this type of stuff. I mean, the kid can run a little bit, too. I wouldn't say the straight line speed is elite or anything. I think it's pretty good straight line speed, though. It's not bad. But the ability to change direction at his size is really eye-popping to me. I was expecting a long kid who has trouble kind of mirroring, matching, and man coverage, but I did not get that pulse. I did not. He's a kid that can really get in and out of his pedal, And then, I mean, you see him change direction, short tackler. As he gains more size to his frame as well, he's going to be even a better tackler down the road. So Leonard Moore, really talented football player out of the state of Texas. Again, you see the run support. You see the ability. They play him in a lot of zone, but I think that he has the tools to be a really nice man corner. You see him right here. It looks like it's cover 3 type, and he's able to just kind of stick. And that's a really nice play there too, because a lot of cover 3 corners, they just think that they just have deep third, and they kind of lose sight of the fact of like, hey, you still have to carry, right? You still have to carry. And he is a guy that has good instincts in zone, long as all heck, really good ball skills. Really good ball skills. You see him up at the top of the screen, a little bit of press man, blitzing off the edge, able to make the tackle in the backfield as well. That's him at the bottom of the screen. Again, guys, he's an easy one to spot on tape because you see the length again. You see it. Blitzing off the edge, involved in run support. Again, as he gets a little bit bigger, he's going to be even a better run support player. Here he is at the top of the screen, playing zone coverage. You know that because his chest is to the middle of the field. Works the middle slant, able to get that long swipe away at the last second. Leonard Moore here. Here he is at the bottom of the screen, able to counteract physicality at the point of attack and able to stay in the wide receiver's hip pocket and have an opportunity to make another play on the football. I mean, again, that type of change of direction, guys, I think is just pretty rare. I do. I know I've talked about it like 6 times already, but this kid really, for a longer-legged, long athlete, he understands how to stay low in his back pedal, how to get in and out of his breaks. Like, there's a lot of really clean movement skills for a guy like Leonard Moore. Then there's the ball skills flashing again. Like, I think they targeted him again. I think it was like 18 total times all year or 9 total times, excuse me. And he had 3 interceptions off of 9 total targets. So he's a very active player. And you can see that Brown Rock blitzes him off the edge a little bit already. Here he is at the bottom of the screen. You can tell they definitely do not play incredibly aggressive style coverage at his school. But there he is getting off the block, coming outside in, and ripe enough for an easy tackle. And the ability that he has as a punt returner as well, I think highlights a little bit of the athletic upside that he has. Because again, I don't think that he's necessarily crazy long speed player. Like I don't expect him to run like, 4.3, 4.4. Like I think he's more of a 4.5 something kid. But when you have that type of length, that's where the range comes from. There's different ways to skin a cat. There's different ways to have range on the back end of a defense. And there's a lot of traits, I think, to really work with a guy like Moore. Here he is, press man up top on the screen. This is one of the small occasions where he's able to play some man coverage, and I think you see the mirror match, the ability to get in and out of his pedal and to really stay with different body types. He's a pure outside corner. There's no doubt about it. But I think that although he's going to be able to play, a lot against some bigger wide receivers on the outside, I think he does have the mirror match ability to play against smaller receivers that are outside. So that is Leonard Moore, 2024 cornerback out of Round Rock High School in the state of Texas, visiting Notre Dame this weekend. He's got a pretty impressive offer list. If you go and take a look at his 247 profile or on3 profile, Sean, really impressive football player who I think is going, as he continues to get bigger, get stronger, get more well-known, you're going to hear a lot more about Leonard Moore. And I think it says something to me that he was offered just this past week when they were on the trail. The coaches were out to see him. And within the week, he's going to be on campus on Sunday. So set up that trip very quickly. Think there's a building of a relationship that's already happening, obviously, and he's never been on campus up until this point. So getting Leonard Moore on campus, Sean, for me, I think is a big step. Is a big step for this recruitment. And he's a kid that is going to be a lot better than a 3-star when all is said and done, in my opinion.
We trust Mike Mickens. So if he's coming to campus, he's priority. They want in on him. And he fits the bill of what they're trying to build and develop at Notre Dame in that room. If Mike Mickens asks him to come to Notre Dame and visit, he can play the position and play it confidently. That's one of the traits that sticks out. Mike Mickens likes confident players. Like the guys that he's going after in the 24 class, Because, there are some kids that, like, just from a star standpoint, you recruit them. You offer them, you stay in contact, and then you start to dig deep. Or you get more of an opportunity as a coaching staff to dig deeper on film after the bowl game, which is what most of these coaches love to do, right? And then you're digging, you start to see guys that really are underrated, like we're talking about, really haven't blown up, haven't been talked about a lot. Nobody's really on them from a publication standpoint or ranking site. And this is when you prove your worth as a coach and talent evaluator. Like, let's be honest. Dude, you do this. Do you think Mike Mickens could go be in the front office for someone one day and evaluate talent?
It's possible, man. I mean, it extends past just the fact of, like, yeah, you find Benjamin Morrison, right, who was a little bit underrated on the recruiting trail from a rankings perspective.
Yeah.
But I mean, Sean, he saw something in Cam Hart when he was playing wide receiver to be like, hey, Cam, come play corner, man, and you'd be a darn good one. Like, I do think that Mike Mickens has a very good eye for talent. And I mean, I honestly could have included Carson Hobbs on this too, who's a commit for Notre Dame in 2024. But I wanted to keep this to uncommitted players, obviously targets for Notre Dame. Yeah. But Carson Hobbs is a three-star kid who 6'1", 185 pounds, press man corner type. I mean, that's another kid that I think Mike Mickens is going to be very early on because he was committed to South Carolina. He's got a pretty good offer list, but he's a three-star recruit right now,
That confidence trait we're talking about.
Yeah.
At that position, you have to have it, man. You have to have it. Like we were talking on Lucky Lefty earlier today about the Ohio State game, right? And Benjamin Morrison got beat early in the game. But then you looked up, every time he got beat, it was really zone. But when he was allowed to play his game, like, man, he was covering Marvin Harrison Jr. He was covering Egbuka on certain plays. And you saw flashes. And I think he's a very confident player. That I didn't know. Like, I thought he was a technician, really good player, until I went to camp and I saw his interaction with Logan Diggs. And then I saw that the defensive players had his back as a true freshman. And I said, oh, this kid, he's ready for it. He wants to smoke. And I think when you see guys, you see film like this kid wants to smoke. And at that position, you have to be able to let things go. Like, your confidence has to be such that it can't be broken.
Yes.
You have to move on. Move on to the next play. That's cool. You got me. I'm coming back. And it's not only skill and traits, but it seems like it's a certain mentality of young men at that position that Mike Mickens is going after, that this young man falls right in line.
Agree. And especially the case for Benjamin Morrison too, Sean. He wasn't an early enrollee. He didn't show up till June, right? Like, he had to come in and he had to know his worth from day one because it's harder for a guy to come in after spring practice and make an impact like that. And he was able to do that, obviously, as a freshman. So I do think, though, for me, you talk about body types and talent and athletic attributes, like all those types of things when you evaluate. But I really do think that coaches are drawn to personality a lot, right? The similar personalities, especially at corner, to your point, because cornerbacks are going to get beat, man. See, it's going to happen, right? They're going to give up touchdowns from time to time. They're going to give up catches. But who are the ones that when things are going wrong, that they can flip the switch and make the big play, get a big pass breakup, create an interception, be that confident type of football player? I know that Benjamin Morrison looks like that guy already. I think that Christian Gray could be that guy. Leonard Moore, I think, could potentially be that guy. Maybe I don't know if he ends up with Notre Dame. Like, it's very early, right? But he is already getting on campus, which is big for Notre Dame. And the cornerback room, who's going to be the second, at least, if you're going to carry 2 to 3 corners in the class, who are going to be those guys to pair with a Carson Hobbs? I think that there's a lot of questions right now. I mean, they're going to maintain conversations with guys like Caleb Beasley and the elite players on the board, but you're going to have to continue to build relationships with these types of kids because they may be very early on Leonard Moore to a degree, but he's going to keep blowing up. Just trust me when I say that. He's going to be a 4-star consensus kid before you blink an eye. Like, I think he's that type of player. So That's the last defensive back we have, though, Sean. I want to move to the big boys, man. I left the linebackers off the list today because I didn't want my bias to come out during this show. Okay? I didn't want my bias to come out. And honestly, most of the linebackers on Notre Dame's board are all very highly rated. So it's not they're going after highly rated kids at linebacker. Like they're all, 4-star, top 250 type of players, at least. Defensive linemen, though, there's been some interesting additions to the board over the last few weeks. I want to go to one kid that's been on the board now for a few weeks, couple weeks, who, when I first saw it, Sean, I had the same reaction that a lot of people I'm sure had. They're like, oh, a 3-star? There's our defensive lineman? Because at that point, you were like not feeling quite as good about Justin Scott as you do now, and you're just kind of like, oh, defensive line recruiting, I don't know what's happening here. Let me introduce you all to Benedict Ume, who is a defensive lineman out of the state of Connecticut, out of Old Farms in Avon, Connecticut. Sean, my guy is listed at 6'6", 270 pounds, and he looks very skinny. So let's pop up some film here. Again, this is Benedict Ume, who is a star defensive lineman out of the state of Connecticut. Excuse me. Let's roll through some of his film, Sean. Things that we see on film. I mean, first thing I popped off to me, man, is that length is stupid. Like that's the first thing is that he is a long kid, man.
I wish you could see my notes. First thing, size and length. That was the first thing I wrote down. It's like, you're absolutely right. And this is something else. As you watch this film, I noticed he's really good at hand placement already.
Yeah.
Like at locking out and being able to disengage. He's, for a sophomore, for a junior, he's pretty good at that.
He is. And the thing I love too, Sean, is like this body's obviously super projectable, right? I mean, he's going to be 6'6", whatever he is, height-wise, long arms. He's going to be 300 plus easy down the road, man.
That's what we need. That's what we need, baby.
But the kid can move too, Sean. Like this isn't just like a nose, man. Like this is I'm not comparing him to Stephon Tuitt because Stephon Tuitt was one of the best we've seen at Notre Dame, right? And turned into a very good player in Steelers before he retired. But this is a Stephon Tuitt body type, right? He is long as anything, but he still has the look that like even when he's 300 pounds, he's still going to look like athletic. He's not just going to be fat, right? Like he's going to be a really athletic looking 300-pounder, but he's explosive, man. I think this kid could play some 4-eye, could play 3-tech, could play some 5 at times. Like he's that type of explosive athlete. He's not going to be an outside track pass rusher, but he's going to be able to line up at different areas. And for a team that we think was going to want to play some 3-man and some 4-man potentially this season and moving forward, Benedict Ume is the type of kid that would fit that perfectly. I mean, I think you see the explosiveness. He's not playing against the best competition in Connecticut, obviously, but when you look at the size, the length, the upside, the explosiveness, I think everything's there for him, man. I really do. And I don't know if he's going to ultimately be in the Notre Dame class, Sean, because there's actually a lot of defensive linemen. For as much as we've talked about, some of, and very fair, Al Washington's shortcomings this cycle so far, right? They are still in a really good spot with several really good players on the defensive line, right? And good spot with several. We'll talk more about that in the mailbag. So there might not be a spot open for Benedict Ume. But if they can make it work, this is a kid that I would gamble on, man. Like, this isn't like let's say in a different world where if you didn't get a Justin Scott, you sell this guy as your replacement. Like, no, that's not the way we're doing this, right? But if you had Justin Scott in the class,
I was just looking at that play. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. If you had Justin Scott in the class, though, and then you could take a gamble on a kid that might be a couple years down the road instead of an instant producer, Benedict Ume is that guy, man. And he's got a lot of background as far as he really likes Notre Dame already. They've been on him for a couple weeks, obviously. And I envision him. He's going to visit sometime in the near future. He's already visited once, but I know that he already wants to go back. He's been courted by quite a few teams already because, again, 6'6", 270, going to be 300 plus easy. This kid is a scheme-diverse interior defensive lineman that has a lot of upside for me, just a lot of upside.
You see him, he has 2-gap ability. even if he gets up to 300 pounds, double R, it seems like he's going to have two gap ability, which
Yeah.
is
I mean,
really good.
because the extension, right? He's able to gain extension and play those two gaps, to your point, right? But I also think he's explosive, where he could be a one gap player too, and he could do those types of things. Like, this is a diverse player. I would not be shocked, folks, because he's a 3-star right now rated. I would not be shocked if this is a top 150 kid if he takes a jump as a senior. Like, I think he has that type of upside. He's a really, really talented interior defensive lineman, Benedict Dume. I think that if he puts it together, this could be one of the better defensive linemen in the 2024 class, at least from an upside perspective. Like, I think he has that type. And he's a Canadian kid originally, moved to Connecticut, obviously, to pursue the football dreams and everything. So Notre Dame's had some success with Canadian-born players. They may have, and they just signed 2 kids in this past cycle, in Armel Mukum and Devin Houston, that have the Canadian ties from the defensive line. And honestly, like, this kid has about as much upside as any player in 2023 at the defensive line position, in my opinion, right? Is he ready to play? I wouldn't say that. I still think he's a little ways to go, Sean, but this is a kid, again, if you're comfortable with the top of your defensive line class, right? If you're comfortable with that, and you have the opportunity to take a guy like a Benedict Dume as maybe the fourth or fifth defensive lineman and let him develop behind guys like Justin Scott, hopefully, and the rest of the defensive linemen on campus, like, this kid could be a really valuable player in a couple years, in my opinion.
No, I absolutely agree. Like, he's going to naturally get bigger. And if he gets up to 295 north of 300 with that athleticism, now you're talking about what Marcus Freeman has been preaching all off season, building the middle of your roster. It not only comes from getting big time players like Justin Scott, but you still have to be a developmental program as well. And when you get guys like Armel Mukum, Boubacar Traore, and this young man, that's what you're talking about. We're putting guys that have the length and size that we can project to get here, and we know we can develop them because they still have the athleticism to make an impact. Give them a year or two, get a good size on them, put some weight on them, some strength on them. He already at 270, he already plays with his hands.
Yes.
You can speak to this. I watch so many interior defensive and offensive linemen that just flat out know they are bigger and stronger than kids.
And they don't know how to use their hands. Yeah.
They have zero technique.
Well, Sean, I mean, which is a surprising one, but based on junior film at least, Bryce Young, who Notre Dame fans obviously know, right? Bryant Young's young son, who is in the state of North Carolina, who Notre Dame's high on. And I think he is also reciprocates that interest in Notre Dame. And I think that he may end up in the class for Notre Dame when all is said and done. Like, I think it's a very high possibility. But Bryce Young doesn't know how to use his hands at all, right? Like, he doesn't. Benedict Dume knows how to use his hands a little bit, which is promising. He's just a kid that needs to continue to develop the finer nuances of playing the position.
And you don't understand, like, teenagers. Like, I was talking to someone yesterday, and I was just saying, like, you know this. You have an infant right now, Ryan. So I'm on the back end. You don't understand how many times you have to say the same thing over and over again. You were a teacher as well. So, dude, you're used to having to say the same thing over and over again to kids until they get it. And it's the same thing when you're teaching football when he's young men.
I'm a former teacher and a father. I get ignored very often.
Absolutely. And at some point, for some reason, the things that you've said constantly, it clicks for them, right? And it's the same thing when you're coaching. Like, coaches teach technique and take them through drills over and over again. And it doesn't click for some guys until they get up against equal talent. And then they realize, okay, I have to do it. I don't have a choice now. And then the smarter kids say, okay, let me go ahead and figure out how to do it the right way now. So as I matriculate to the next level and then the next level, it helps me to be able to develop quicker and faster. And this is the type of kid, he seems to be like that type of kid that is taken to his coaching and implemented. So that's another good thing.
Yeah, no, it is. And the one thing I've liked about a lot of the defensive line offers, Sean, because again, Notre Dame's in good position with several very talented defensive linemen in 2024. But I'll give Al Washington this credit and the rest of the staff from the defensive line perspective. The last week or so, they're adding a lot of length and talent to the offer list for Notre Dame. They really are.
That's good to hear. That's absolutely amazing to hear because we have been critical.
Yes, we
and
have.
rightfully so, of what needs to happen. And things are it seems like things are trending that way.
Yep. And the next two players are guys that bring a lot of length to the table, especially the next guy, Sean, because I want to introduce for you all a recent offer list last week. Only Maryland's good counsel defensive end, Darian Mayo. If good counsel sounds familiar, Kyle Altuner, who is in the 2024 class, who has an offer from Notre Dame, the offensive guard, is also from good counsel. So Darian Mayo, Sean, as I bring up the film on him, is, again, the first thing that pops up when you talk about Darian Mayo, similar to Benedict Ume, although different, because Darian Mayo is a true edge, while Benedict Ume, and he's at the top of the screen here playing defensive end. He is long as all heck, man. And do you see that spin up top, Sean? Did you see that spin? Did you see it? Oh, man. Listed at 6'6" or 6'7", depending on what recruit platform you look at, 247 to 250 pounds, man. He is long. First guy that popped in my head when I saw this kid's film. Reminds me a lot of Gregory Rousseau, who played at Miami, plays with the Buffalo Bills. Mm-hmm. Just crazy length, man. Crazy length. You see the long arms. You see him here rushing from a 2-point stance, but the explosiveness he has too for a guy his size, I think, is really interesting as well, and decent flexibility as well.
He's a good dancer, Ryan. You know how I know how?
Yeah,
he has good feet. Like that first pass rush where he put on double moves and countered the tackle, he has good feet. You like to see that from a guy that's just not a one-trick pony when it comes to a pass rush. And I'm not saying that he's going to continue to develop and add more to his repertoire. But at this age, when he recognizes like, yo, I have to be able to do more than just come around the corner on guys or bull rush guys, and seeing the feet that he has, I like it. I like it. The length goes without saying, right?
Yes.
It goes without saying. But he has a little mean streak too, it seems like.
And as he adds a little more weight to his frame, Sean, because like I said, he's a skinny kid right now. But as he learns how to use his hands more aggressively and with a little more violence, because I think you see that he has a little bit of that mean streak to him with how he plays. Like he plays pretty hard. But, I mean, again, man, you can't teach length. You can't teach this type of athleticism. And he's pretty flexible for his size, which is surprising, right? Like you expect these types of long guys to just be straight line athletes. You don't expect them to be twitchy, but that first move he put on, hitting that spin move, man, like that's a pretty flexible move. And as he continues to develop and really sharpen the tools, man, I think this kid has a ton of upside. Again, Gregory Rousseau is a guy that pops in my head almost immediately because, again, Gregory Rousseau was 6'7", 245 around his redshirt freshman year. Now he's playing for Buffalo at 270 pounds, and he still looks a little skinny, right? Because he just got that body to put on a lot of good weight. That's what I see with a guy like a Darian Mayo. I want to put a fire out on a false report that was put out there. I don't know who put it out there, so I'm really not throwing shade, I promise here. There was a report, though, that Darian Mayo was visiting campus this weekend, the 29th. He is not visiting Notre Dame this weekend. The 28th, he will be in Clemson. He said that he wants to visit Notre Dame soon, but he does not have a set date for when he is visiting Notre Dame. So he will not be at Notre Dame this weekend like there was an original report by someone. I genuinely do not know who it was, but yeah, he's a good player, though, man. He's a good player. And I think the best part of it, too, Sean, is that this is a kid that is nowhere near his ceiling. Nowhere near.
No.
And Sean, I don't know if we've talked about it, but me and Brian have definitely talked about it. Getting these Catholic school kids from the DMV area, right? The Marylands, the DCs, the Virginias, getting those types of kids in that DMV area. Because, I mean, when's the last time Notre Dame got a kid from like the Matha Catholic, for instance, right? Like they need to get those kids.
Who was, oh man, that was a big time recruit from good counsel. Maybe 10 years ago, linebacker. He was like one of the top 30 players in the nation, and Notre Dame was in their top 3. I forget his name. Brian knows who he is because we were actually talking about him when this young man got offered, and I saw good counsel. I was like, remember that guy we're in on? And he was like, yeah. And we finally figured out the name, but it escapes you right now.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think he ended up going to Florida, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Was it darn. I know who you're talking about, man.
Yeah. It took me and Brian about an hour before finally he come back.
Man, that's going to drive me crazy now, man, because I know exactly who you're talking about, and for some reason it won't pop in my head. I mean, he was like he played in the NFL, NFL too, I think, right? Like,
I believe so.
It'll come back. But that's Darian Mayo. Again, will not be visiting Notre Dame this weekend, but will be on campus soon. You know, he's trying to set up a visit to Notre Dame here pretty soon. So another interesting player. Sean, I want to bring up a kid now that I don't think anyone is really aware of, because honestly, I just became aware of him a couple days ago when I found out. And we had on the message board, we put Brian has been putting out intel pieces every single day about where the staff is going to be where they're going to be on the day on the road. And today, coaches were out to see a young man named Deshaun Warner, who is a defensive end out of the state of Arizona. He goes to, I had it here, he is a Desert Edge kid out of Goodyear, Arizona. So the staff is out to see him today, Sean. Brian sent me his highlights without telling me that he was doing this a couple days ago, that he was going to visit him, or that the staff was going to visit him. And I popped it on, and immediately I'm like, oh, like these are my legitimate reactions. I'm like, first play, oh, second play, oh, third play, oh, like that's my true emotions and reactions to that type of player. So let's pop up Deshaun Warner, who listed at 6'4", 215 pounds. He's more of a hybrid edge. Like, he's going to kind of play in space a little bit. You'll see on his stats, I think he had like 9 sacks, but like a couple interceptions as well. They asked him to do a little bit of everything out of his high school in Arizona. So Deshaun Warner, I mean, I think you see Sean immediately. Actually, you tell me what the first word that pops in your head when you see this kid is. I want to hear your reaction, instant reaction here.
Hey, I found him, by the way, because it was killing me. Jelani Jenkins.
Johnny Jenkins. Yes.
Yes.
I almost said Janoris Jenkins. I'm like, nope, that is a corner. That is not yeah.
Jelani Jenkins. It was Notre Dame, Penn State, and Florida.
Gotcha.
Dude, I don't want to tell you to rewind because I didn't get a chance to see, but oh, wow.
Are you?
Okay.
No, I'll rewind.
Okay.
We have the technology. I don't think anybody's here is going to, I mean, they can't say anything because it's our show, man. It's our show. We got this. That's it. But Sean, I want you to tell me the first word that comes to mind when you see this kid. Because there was one word in particular. I texted Brian back immediately after watching like 3 plays where I was like, yep, that's the word.
Yo, this dude's first step is
That's part of it. That's crazy. A part of it. Yeah. That's a part of it. My word, Sean, my word was twitchy. Dude is twitchy, man.
Oh, this inside move.
Yeah, man. He looks like a basketball player playing defensive end, man. He's got that little Euro step inside, like he's got that twitch. This is an outside track kid. This is him. This is a Viper. This is a kid that is super flexible, very explosive, and he can finish in space. That's what this kid is. I mean, look at him right here working from depth, delivering a shot at the sideline, man. Kid's athletic, man. Very athletic. Oh, look. He picked up the fumble. Look at him. He can run a little bit, Sean. He can run a little bit.
He turns quarterbacks into dancers. You know what I mean? The quarterbacks start getting a little choppy feet.
Yep.
Because they expect pressure. That's like that's the greatest thing about, if you watch playoffs football, man. That's the greatest thing about the impact of guys like Bosa and Hassan Reddick.
Yep.
Like you just feel it. Even when they don't get close, it's almost like you feel them breathing down your neck, right? And it's just that extra second that could lead to like an incompletion, a bad decision, because you're
Yep.
just anticipatory of that consistent pressure that they bring. And he's that type of guy, like
Yes.
a Micah Parsons, where he might not even be close to you, but you just anticipate, okay, he has to be coming. He has
And
to be coming.
And again,
Ooh.
if you're just joining us now, this is Deshaun Warner out of Desert Edge High School in Arizona. Notre Dame is out to see him today. He does not currently hold an offer from Notre Dame, but we'll see if that changes sometime in the near future. I think it might, but I don't have any direct intel on that. I popped on the film and I'm like, if that kid academically is a good fit and personally is a good fit, that's a very talented football player, man. He is twitchy as all heck. Plays well in space. I mean, this is a football player, man. This really is. Sean, this reminds me a little bit of, you remember last cycle, Notre Dame got in a little bit on Blake Purchase, who ended up at Oregon. But this kid's a little longer and a little twitchier than Blake Purchase. But they are similar in the sense that they can both do a little bit of everything. They can play in space. They can pass rush. Man. Someone just put in the chat, and I think they're talking about Julian Aquara as kind of a little bit of a comp. And I could see that, man. I could see it. He's got a little bit of twitch and flexibility that Julian had.
I would think right now he might, and I would be interested in seeing what you and Brian said. I would say he's probably a little bit further along than Julian was as a junior in high school.
Well, what's funny, Sean, and I know Julian was obviously a very athletic kid, right? And he had a decent rating at this point. This kid, to people's questions, like this is on the underrated section of the podcast because he is only a 3-star ranked player right now. He's not ranked like very high at all by anyone.
Why did he do that to that tackle, man?
I'm trying to wonder, man. I'm trying to wonder myself on some of these, man. Some of these are just silly stuff, but I mean, because I think he's pretty long as well. Like, I mean, he's not as long as a Darian Mayo, obviously, right? But like, pretty good length, explosiveness. I mean, he's an easy outside track winner. He's an easy winner around the edge. There he is, getting his hands up in the passing game. I think this kid's going to be a big riser. Whether he gets an offer from Notre Dame, whether he ends up with Notre Dame or someone else, like it doesn't really matter to me. This kid, Deshaun Warner out of Arizona, is a really talented football player.
He is the prototype that you want in this day and age, right? Going against spread offenses, going against RPOs, coming off the edge, having the athleticism not only rush the quarterback, chase from behind, and shut down their run, or play both in a situation and slow play it until your linebackers can get in on a play. He's a prototype guy that you want to get coming off the edge and at that viper position.
Yes, he really is, man. Like, this is a player where if it makes sense and there's an offer given out, like, again, maybe there isn't room for him when it all is said and done, but this is a kid that if you're Notre Dame, you do your homework on and you keep recruiting because you never know what happens in recruiting at this point. Like, you never know. So keep recruiting this type of kid. Keep recruiting the Darian Mayos. Keep recruiting the Benedict Umes. Keep recruiting those kids because you never know what happens from just a recruiting perspective anymore as far as kids staying in the class, kids committing, decommit. Like, you don't know any of that stuff, right? So I don't want to call them plan Bs, but like Notre Dame needs to keep some kids on the board that are very talented. And if they do that, that's how you win football games, right? That's how you win recruiting because that's how you find the depth in a class. So really talented football player who Arizona is another hotbed, Sean. We talked about the DMV area obviously on the last one with Darian Mayo. Arizona getting into that state a little bit more frequently moving forward, I think would be a very wise move because there's more and more talent that's popping up about in the state of Arizona. So I'm very interested in a player like Deshaun Warner. And we have one player left, Sean. I left the most fun highlight tape to end us here. Not necessarily saying he's the best player we'll be talking about today, but one of the most fun ones. So, fun backstory here, Sean. This is a really fun one, actually. So, David Pale, who is a defensive tackle Out of Pennsylvania, he went to Henfield High School, Sean. He's going to IMG Academy for his final year. Pele.
Okay.
Originally, he's from Alaska. He lived in Alaska until he was 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So he's in Alaska until he's 14 years old, moves to Pennsylvania, plays at Henfield. Now he's going to IMG his final year. This kid's a very well-traveled player, just moving further south as he's going here. 6'3", about 300 pounds, true defensive tackle inside, true nose type. Also the cousin of the Sewells, Penne and Noah Sewell. So David Pele was offered a few weeks ago now at this point, Sean. But I will say this, man. This is one of these highlight tapes where it's absolutely hilarious. It's just hilarious. It's hilarious. So let's take a look at a little bit of David Pele. And you'll be seeing him at number 54 on the film, who will be playing IMG this year, who is a little bit of a stumpy build, but they play him on the edge, just speaking to the athleticism he has.
We need some stumpiness at Notre Dame. We need some stumpiness. We need some butt. We need some anchor at Notre Dame. We need some Vita Vea, that type vibe. Absolutely. We need some stumpiness in Notre Dame. Take us back to the days of Lewis Nix that we can combine, with the Justin Scott. Ooh, man.
And you know what else we need too, Sean? We need 300-pounders that move like this.
Man.
That move like Justin Scott. Like move like that guy as well. I mean, look, this kid's rushing off the edge at near 300 pounds, man.
With attitude.
Yes.
Is that the way they hit in high school?
Man. And he stands up as a defensive end as well. Wow. It's not even like his hands in the ground. Like he stands up, which you don't often see from 300-pounders. You don't see that too often. Unless you're Julius Peppers, who's also like 6'7". You don't really see that very often.
Oh, wow.
But he's pretty, like, Sean, I mean, he's not going to be bendy like a true defensive end, but he can change direction pretty dang well for as big as he is, man. And he's got pretty good straight line speed.
Yeah.
I mean, look at that. This is a kid that can play nose, can do some of the dirty work as a two-gap player, but also he's got one-gap ability because he is an explosive athlete for as big as he is. Here he is at the nose.
Yeah,
look at the effort he plays with.
Really nice.
Yes, very nice.
Look at him.
Here he is again at nose. What'd you say?
Did you see that? He's very intelligent too. He's looking over the front, like before the snap. He's looking to see where everybody is, where the offense. So he's not just out there playing. He has a plan.
Yes,
I like that. I like that.
I mean, there he is beating a center's block, beating a guard's block, and then one thing, man, he finishes at the quarterback. Like he doesn't just doesn't wrap dudes up, man. He finishes cats. He finishes them. Also has a track and field background, so he's got a little bit of lower body explosiveness that you typically see from guys that are shot putters. But again, this kid's a true nose at the next level, especially in Notre Dame system. Kid that was offered by Notre Dame a couple weeks ago. Big man interception, Sean. He's got the ball.
Block for the big guy, man. Let him get out and rumble.
Yeah. Here he is working in pursuits. You see the speed, man. Speed is very good for a guy his size. Fluid and fast.
No, now he's in the middle.
I love the towel too. I always love the towel for the big guys on the back.
You know what I love? Oh man, I would love to run a TE stunt with him if I was an edge player, because he can move over multiple. You know what I'm saying? He can move quickly, laterally over multiple holes, multiple windows. That opens things up.
And here he is playing offensive tackle just to boot.
Oh, wow.
Obviously, he's not going to play offensive tackle at the next level, but I like well-roundedness as a football player personally. And again, this is a kid, Sean. It's only a 3-star, you know? Only a 3-star, man. That'll change very quickly because he's playing at IMG Academy next year. So
I'll be honest. Once I heard he's going to IMG, I was like, oh boy, here we go. Here we go.
Yep. I felt the same, to be honest, but yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah.
But adding someone, another 5-star, possibly, could.
Definitely a 4-star. I think he's definitely a 4-star.
I'm just saying, adding somebody else at that position might intrigue him to say, oh, okay, man, maybe I'll go there too.
Well, and that's a great point, Sean. I mean, because we'll talk about it in the mailbags. I think there was a question about it, but I mean, adding a Justin Scott, like what defensive tackle wouldn't want to play next to a Justin Scott, right? To be able to, because Justin's going to get a lot of attention inside. And if it's a David Pele or one of the other defensive tackles on the board, you're going to have a lot of one-on-one opportunities potentially even working inside, especially in pass rush situations. I mean, here he is at nose again. I love that he pretty consistently wears those red shirts, so you can kind of always find him. But I mean, that quickness right there, man. That handover. I mean, it's so good, man. It's explosive. We'll watch a couple more here. He's got the towel. Yeah.
He's talking to everybody on the front. Like, I don't know if he's telling them what the alignment is, or like, yo, this is the play that's coming. But he seems like he's a very in tune defensive lineman. And the rule that I worked with John Yurkovich for plenty of years. Here in Chicago, he used to tell me, Sean, the closer you are to football, the smarter you are, or the smarter you have to be. So he's showing that.
Sean, I saw an interview he did like last year, I think, during the season. It was just on YouTube, I think, or maybe I found it on Twitter, but he's a really well-spoken kid as well. So he's very intelligent. You can just kind of get that authenticity out of him as well, which is very intriguing. But that, again, is David Pele. We're going to pop in this last clip of him to see what he does here to end this section of the podcast. They didn't block him. You might want to block him, Sean. You might want to block him. So
that would be a good idea.
Yes, it very, very well would be. So that's going to conclude this portion of the podcast here. Again, working through some of the underrated players on the board on the defensive side of the football for Notre Dame. Next Monday, we'll be doing the offensive side of the football. But today we went through Swainsboro safety, DeMello Jones. Go listen back to the beginning of the podcast if you want any of these, by the way. DeMello Jones, Round Rock cornerback, Leonard Moore out of the state of Texas. Old Farms defensive lineman Benedict Ume out of Connecticut, Good Counsel defensive end Darian Mayo out of the state of Maryland. We also did Desert Edge defensive end Deshaun Warner out of Arizona, and then ended it with David Pele, who is from Pennsylvania, played last year, but he's going to be playing at IMG Academy this year. So we're going to get to the mailbag next. So start throwing your mailbag questions in there. I know that there's already bunch of mailbag questions that I have started. We're going to try to get through as many as we possibly can before we got to jet out of here. But that's going to conclude, Sean, before we get to the mailbag, this portion of the defensive underrated recruits for Notre Dame for 2024. All right, Sean. And actually, hit that like button, subscribe, notification bell, all that good stuff too. Now let's get into the mailbag. All right, Sean, let's bring up a lot of mailbag questions. I'm just making sure we didn't have any super chats because I want to kick those to the top of the conversation we did. Do not see it. So just had from Rob Osgood who said, comments, I love the way the staff is attacking the recruiting trail, looking at the now 2024 guys, but yet planning for the future. What else, in your opinion, can they do that they haven't done yet? So, Sean, obviously this is talking about, Rob's kind of talking about that they're extending offers to 2025 kids. They're adding to the board to make sure that they have options on the board. I mean, Rob, I don't know if I would say they can really do anything else other than continue doing what they're doing, right? Like, you need to keep visiting new players, keep the conversations with those kids, expand the board. And people think that expanding the board, and I don't know if you agree with this, Sean, but like I kind of, from an outside perspective, I look at the board, I look at Twitter sometimes. People think that when recruiters and coaches expand the board, it's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing because they assume they expanded the board because they're missing on some guys. And sometimes that's true, right? Sometimes it is. But then other times, there's a little bit of foresight to putting out more offers, building your board, making sure you have options on the board. Because what if you're in a situation where you were high on a player at one point, you extended an offer to a 3-star player, let's say, and then they blow up. And they're actually better with a year of development than the player that you were high on before. Like establishing a board to be able to pick and kind of understand the development of certain players, I think is huge, man. So I just don't think expanding boards is a negative. And I know Rob's not saying this, obviously, I'm just thinking out loud. I think it's more having foresight to how you recruit. It's what I think Notre Dame is doing a very good job of so far in this cycle.
And it gives you the opportunity to be available or have access to young men in comparison to other teams if circumstances happen, right? Coaches leave certain programs. A kid right before signing day, man, I'm no longer committed to the coach that I thought was going to be there. So now my recruitment is open again.
Yep.
Guess who's going to have the best shot with limited time? The coaching staffs and schools that have a previous relationship that got in on him early. Those are going to be the main ones that get the visit or two that he has left to make a decision. And I think we saw recently in the 23 class, there was an edge player that decommitted from Northwestern, and his relationship was with the Penn State staff. And Notre Dame was trying to get him to take a visit, and they didn't have that relationship. So Penn State got the visit and ultimately got the commitment. So that's why you expand the board, because you never know how recruiting is going to go. You just never know how the balls are going to fall in recruitment because you're dealing with teenagers. So, and then, like I said, you get coaches leaving, guys reopen their commitments that you were talking to earlier. You realize you still have spots left. There's still a need in the class. And that's why you do it.
Yep. No doubt. And so I don't know if there's anything I would necessarily change, Rob. I would just say that, you have to continue to learn also, right? And I think that expanding the board again is important to that. Notre Dame had a couple decommitments in 2023. So continuing to recruit good football players so you have those relationships to what Sean's saying, right? Like the kid that decommitted from Northwestern, he already had that relationship with Penn State. Like that's a part of the reason, right? So I think continuing to develop those relationships is never a bad thing. Never a bad thing, in my opinion. Sean, we have one that I'm going to kick to you in a second. It's I sell one for 2K. Okay. Would this be a recruitment we should give time once he commits, or is he locked in 100%? This is back to our conversation begin this podcast about Justin Scott, who is picking between Notre Dame and a bevy of other schools. So basically the question is here, Sean, is do you think that Justin Scott's 100% locked in, or that's how I'm taking this, right? Is he 100% locked in when he makes his commitment?
I think any kid, when they make an initial commitment, I think Keon Keeley was 100% locked in when he made his commitment. He was an early commit. He was a 3-star. I think he couldn't forecast that he would move up the charts like that or move up the rankings like that, and that other schools like Alabama would come at him over the summer. That wasn't something that he forecasted, because he hadn't played. He wasn't playing games. So anytime you have a commit like this, make a decision, I think that 100% commit. And just over time, you always have time to think about. It's a long way to National Signing Day from right now. So I would venture to say, knowing the young man, he's going to show Notre Dame fans or whatever fan base he chooses to be a part of when he makes his decision. He's going to show in his actions how committed he is to the program. So and just so Ryan, you stepped away. I was just saying, look, I think the majority of these kids are 100% committed when they make their decision initially. And if you make an early decision, you have time, and time leads to different thoughts, and it leaves opportunity for other programs to continue to make their recruiting pitch. And over time, young men, they can change their mind. But you can't tell me Keon Keeley wasn't 100% locked in when he initially committed as a 3-star.
No.
Because he didn't know that he was about to fly up the rankings. He didn't know what was about to happen. And based upon what happened, the people around him chose to take advantage
Things
of
changed around him.
how things had changed. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's the difficulty. But like I pointed out earlier, the contrast between the people around Keon Keeley, and this is no shade, but just the contrast. Oh, it could be shade. The contrast of the people around Keon Keeley versus the people around Justin Scott is like night and day.
Yes. Yes. Man, it's a shame. It's still a shame because, Keon had to do what Keon had to do, and I respect him for it, right? But, man, I still wish he was at Notre Dame because he's just such a good kid.
Like,
really
you can't even be mad at him.
No, I'm not mad at – I was never mad at
Yeah.
Keon Keeley. I was never mad at him, man. Like, because at the end of the day, man, I'm reporting on what these kids are deciding, right? This isn't my life. It's their life. They're entitled to do whatever they want. I selfishly wanted Keon on the part of the team, not only because he's a really good football player, but I've had the chance to talk to him, right? And he's a really, really good kid. I like him a lot. I would have loved his personality to be a part of Notre Dame even more than what he does on the football field. And then plus I would have liked him as a football player too, because he's a great player, right? But just all aroundness, I think would have been a great fit at Notre Dame, but he's going to be a great player at Alabama. So this is what it is at this point. Next question we have from Nick Lane. He had a bunch of questions he popped in, Sean. We'll try to answer as many from him as possible. Okay. We said, Mailbag, how are we doing with Ryan Wingo and Jalen McClain, who is a defensive back out of New Jersey?
Excuse me. I'll let you bring up, hit me in. I'll get on base right here. You knock me in.
Sounds good.
I think they sit really good because of relationships, right? In my opinion, the 24 class might have just as strong as a bond as the 23 class when it comes to like the relationship between the commits and how they move. Like it's pretty strong. And they have their quarterback, they have their wide receiver, and I think they're about to get the defensive leader, in my opinion. Not that they don't have other defenders in the class, but I think they have the defensive leader, and they have their mouthpiece and Carson Hobbs. So that's going to keep everybody light. So the culture and the overall presence of the class is going to be very similar, if not greater, than the 23 class. Now, look, Ryan Wingo, that's a battle to the end. Like, down to the end. Like, everybody's on him. Everyone is on him. And it literally
as they should be. As they should
be.
Yeah.
I said this last year. Like, there's no way I would have a son of mine that's a big-time recruited wide receiver. I don't want to hear what you have to say over the summer. I want to see the first 4 weeks of the season. Like, I want to watch your offense. Because you can tell me everything you want to. You can prepare practices. If you know I'm coming to visit, you can prepare a practice to wow me.
Right.
You can set it up. But that game tape, it's not going to lie. That's not lying. And that's just my opinion. But with both of these guys, I think late summer into the fall is probably where decisions are coming. They're St. Louis guys. I mean, I think it will probably be very similar to Jeremiah Love. It's going to be hotly contested. Contested. And a lot of reports out there, a lot of false reports. There's going to be a lot surrounding both of these kids. I don't think they both end up at the same school, though.
Yeah.
I don't see that.
Yeah. It's going to be really interesting, specifically with Ryan Wingo, because I know everyone just is a foregone conclusion. I see it on the board all the time, showing they're like, hey, he's not ending up in Notre Dame. I'm just like, all right, let's see how it plays out, man. Because like you mentioned, he has a great relationship with Jeremiah Love, for one. He knows Cam Williams pretty well as well. Like, they know each other, man. He knows Christian Gray really well also, the St. Louis guys, right? I'm here to tell you, folks, I'm not going to predict that Ryan Wingo ends up in Notre Dame's class. I'm not going to do that because anything could happen, right? But Does Notre Dame have a legit chance with Ryan Wingo? Absolutely.
I agree.
They do. They do. Because everyone that assumed, everyone just has this assumption that he's a highly regarded wide receiver. He wants NIL money. That's what people think. That's what people think. But it's not always the case, right? Braylon James, Jaden Greathouse, Jaden Greathouse is one of the more accoladed wide receivers coming out of high school football in several years, right? 3 state championships, was like 53-1 at one point in his high school career before the final loss as a starter. He had over 4,000 receiving yards, was being offered NIL money, decided to come up and play at Notre Dame. Braylon James, getting offered NIL money, high academic kid from the state of Texas. His sister also goes to UT, by the way, decides to come up to Notre Dame. Not all wide receivers are the same. Can we stop profiling everybody to be the same guy, right? Can we stop profiling everyone to be the same guy? So Notre Dame does have a shot there. He does. Will it happen? We'll see. But the St. Louis ties are important. Ryan Wingo keeps coming back to Notre Dame. That's also important. He's been there multiple times, not just once or twice. Been there like 3 or 4 times already. He even took a trip back during the season during this offseason because he just wanted to see it again, right? Like he just wants to see it. So there's real possibility. I believe we're talking about Jalen McClain here. I believe, unless he meant Jeremiah McClellan.
I was thinking McClellan.
He may have meant McClellan. I don't know. So Jalen McClain's on the board. He's a safety from New Jersey that the staff was just out to see last week. That one's too early to tell. I think they're still filling it out. I don't know if he's a take at Notre Dame. Like, I don't know any of those things right now. Jeremiah McClellan, though, if we're talking about Jeremiah McClellan, Sean, to your point, relationships matter. Jeremiah loves teammate. It's a really good relationship with him. I know he's got a relationship with Christian Gray as well. Like, they have relationships together, right? They're jaw back and forth when they play. Notre Dame absolutely has a chance with Jeremiah McClellan. Absolutely. So I think that they have a shot with Ryan Wingo. I think they have absolutely a shot with Jeremiah McClellan. Jalen McClain, if that was what Nick was asking, I'm not sure. Not sure yet. Just not. We'll keep you updated. Go BoardSideRestrictOn.com, and when I get an update on him, get an update on him. So,
yeah.
Great question, though, Nick. I know you had a bunch here. I'm going to roll through as many as possible. We want to spread the wealth a little bit. Sean, we had Rob Osgood that said, guys, do you feel an avalanche is coming in recruiting? In my opinion, I can feel it building up. Do you feel an avalanche, Sean?
Hey, man, I think we predicted that. Like, especially once it gets to spring ball and the spring visits start happening. Yeah, it's going to be an avalanche probably from April through July. Just commitment after commitment after commitment. Hey, honestly, in the next 30 days, half the class could be filled. It's a possibility.
Not likely, though. Not likely. Yeah.
Not likely, but I'm just saying it's a possibility. I'm just saying they're sitting in really good position with like 4 to 5 guys that if they wanted to pull the trigger, I would feel really good about the pick being Notre Dame.
Right.
So they're sitting at 7 now.
Yes.
With the projection of 23.
Mm-hmm.
That's only 4. Heck, that's only 4. Another 4 commits.
Yeah, I mean, there's a possibility, too, that the numbers change, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, Sean, I wouldn't be shocked if this number ends up exceeding what 2023 was as far as the number, just because you ended up with 24. Mm-hmm. You thought you were going to get to like 27, 26, 27. So there's a couple spots here, right? There is. So we'll see. We'll see. Ultimately, though, I mean, yes, Rob, I think there's an avalanche coming. If you get a guy like a Justin Scott soon here on the 31st, if you get him, that's a 5-star defensive lineman that you can look at for Notre Dame and be like, hey, man, got him, got CJ Carr, got Cam Williams. You got 3 elite players in 2024 already. Who doesn't want to be a part of that, right? And then you're in a good spot with guys like Jacob and Jared Smith out of Massachusetts, or yeah. You're in good spots with other very talented football players. A couple wide receivers you're in a good spot with. I mean, there's a lot of players that you feel good about your chances with, to your point, Sean. TJ Lindsey's the guy that's high on Notre Dame. I know he's not in decision-making mode down in the state of Arkansas, but you have Bryce Young, who's in a good situation with Notre Dame right now. Like, Notre Dame's going to be in a good spot, man. They're going to be in a good spot. So just be patient with it. But, Rob, to your question, yes, I think an avalanche is coming. Absolutely do. No doubt. All right, Sean, we had a question from TB12 for Heisman. Mailbag,
Nice.
Who would be in your realistic wide receiver hole for Notre Dame, and who makes up the most realistic wide receiver class? All right, Sean, let's say there's 4 spots at wide receiver in 2024. You can only have 4 wide receivers on the board for Notre Dame. Let's go one by one here. Ready? Okay. I'll name a guy, and you can say the same guy, or you can go out of order. Like, it doesn't matter, right? I'll start with which would be, we'll say this is a dream class for Notre Dame, but it has to have some realism tied into it, right? Like, I can't just say like Jeremiah Smith, right? Like, that's not going to happen. He's committed to Ohio State. Like, it's not going to happen. Ryan Wingo is number 1 for me. You, sir?
Emmett Mosley.
Emmett Mosley. Okay. All right. So you got Emmett Mosley. I'll take Ryan Wingo. Wide receiver. I mean, Cam Williams is in that class, right? So that's wide receiver 2. I'll say that's wide receiver 2 for both of us. He's already in the class and he's an elite football player.
Yeah.
For me, I would probably go with Jeremiah McClellan as number 3 for me.
Okay. I'll go Burdell Richardson.
Burdell's a good one. Burdell's a good one. He gives you that big body. Sean, this one might be surprising for a little bit, man. But you know a guy that I really like a lot, who's realistic, but also brings a dynamic. Because right now I'm looking at the board that I've put together so far. I have Ryan Wingo, who's a big, physical, explosive outside receiver.
Right.
I put on there a Jeremiah McClellan, who's a little bit more of an outside receiver, can play in the slot a little bit, but he's a longer strider type of player.
Right.
And then I had Cam Williams, who can do both of those things, and he kind of has that length as well. Right. I'm going to go with a little bit of a player that brings a speed element and maybe a little bit more flexibility for as a high end route runner. Josiah Brown out of the state of New York, who is a track kid who can run, man. Yeah. He can run.
And this one goes out to my boy Malik Zaire, who loves this kid because he plays against him, Jason Robinson.
Jason's good, man. He's a good player. Yeah. And that one honestly is people are going to say he's committed to USC. Folks, I just tell you, every time I talk to Jason Robinson and his family, they have interest in Notre Dame. They steadily do, man. They're letting that thing whole play out. So I wouldn't say that he's off the table, right? I saw Nathan Urbach. What's up, Nathan? Put Micah Hudson in his 4. I just don't. It's not realistic, Nathan. No offense. It's just not. It's not. I mean, I would love Micah Hudson to be here, right? Like, he might be Odell Beckham Jr. reincarnate. Like, he's fantastic, but not really realistic at all. So, Sean, let's do like the most realistic class. Because again, I think that mine's pretty realistic. So I'm going to say this again, right? Cam Williams is in the class. Josiah Brown, I think, is very realistic for Notre Dame. I think Jeremiah McClellan is very realistic class. The number 4 is that I do think that Ryan Wingo is realistic. Like, do you think that you have a similar realistic? Like, do you think Ryan Wingo is realistic? I guess is my question.
Oh, without question.
Yeah.
Without question. It's very realistic. Anyone that thinks otherwise is just not paying attention.
And us saying that he's realistic is not us saying that he will be in the class, right? Like, it's just that they're in the conversation is the whole point. But there's other players that are on the board, Sean, that are very talented. Like, I think if you like Ryan Wingo's game, Jalen Hornsby out of New Jersey has a similar game. Obviously, he's not quite to the status of a Ryan Wingo, obviously, but he's got a similar type of game. Emmett Mosley's a kid that you mentioned that's more of a physical slot type, can do a little bit of everything, right? Burdell Richardson's a kid that you also mentioned that is a big boundary receiver that uses his size and his length incredibly well. So there's a lot of very talented receivers on the board, Sean.
Yep.
That really is. Let us now go to. Let's knock this one out since we're talking about wide receivers. Nick Lane just asked, is Mylan Graham, how are we doing with him and him being in state? So in-state wide receiver, Mylan Graham. He's been considered a lean to Ohio State for a long time. I just don't think it's realistic, Nick. I mean, I think Notre Dame likes Mylan Graham a ton, but I just don't think that he's incredibly realistic right now. So I wouldn't have him at the top of the list for Notre Dame as true possibilities.
Yeah.
Going to go to 99 Problems with BK81. Sean, he said, Mailbag, if Justin Scott were to commit to Notre Dame, how does his commitment affect other top recruits? Does it help Notre Dame with guys like Ryan Wingo, Darius Hayes, Elijah Rushing, Mike Matthews? Would the momentum of a 5-star commitment help overall? Your thoughts, Sean, how much it would help?
That was interesting because defensive linemen aren't really on the circuit, 7-on-7 circuit. So it's a different vibe when you get the quarterback, wide receiver, running back connection and recruiting where guys see where the quarterback is going. They want to play with him and so on and so forth. But I do think getting a 5-star player who is currently ranked in the top 30, depending upon the publication or the ranking source, is huge for Notre Dame in a multiplicity of ways, right? It changes the narrative, number one. And because remember, Keon Keeley wasn't a 5-star when he committed. He wasn't. And I think Peyton Bowen at the time was like a 4 that worked himself into a 5.
Yeah, he was like a top 75-ish type of player, Peyton, and then he worked his way up.
Yeah. Justin Scott was a 5-star this time last year.
Mm-hmm.
That's when he became a 5-star. So I think it would be huge in multiple ways. I do think people will pay attention. I think defensive players will pay attention, and it will get the attention of other because these guys know each other.
Yes.
Right? These guys know about each other. There's more access now. Like when you were in high school, the internet was up when you were in high school, right? You're not as old.
Not as much though, man. We still had dial-up when I was in high school, all right? So it wasn't as accessible.
And when I was in high school, it was strictly the guy you saw in the newspaper. Like, oh, he can play? Yeah. Oh, okay. So, they know about Justin Scott. Everybody around the nation knows who Justin Scott is. And I'm sure they've watched his film, especially the big-time recruits. So it means something. It absolutely means something.
I think for me, and I mentioned this earlier in the show, but I think that recruiting has pillars to a class, right? CJ Carr's a pillar. That's a 5-star potential quarterback. That's a pillar, man.
Yeah,
you can build off of that. That's what you build your building with. Then you have Cam Williams, who you took, similarly to what you're talking about, Sean. He was considered like a 100 to 110-ish, somewhere in that ballpark as a wide receiver, Cam Williams, when he first committed to Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. But then he has his junior year and he blows up. And he's a top 20 player now. I think he's number 20 player on either 247 or on 3. I forget which one. So he's like a borderline 5-star recruit for one service at this point. That's a pillar. And Cam talks a great game, man. He's a great recruiter. So all those together, that's a pillar in your class. Defensively, you have 2 very good football players committed in the class right now, but you don't have a pillar. Justin Scott's a pillar. That's a guy you look at and say, wow, they got that guy? They got him? And for some guys, I think that will matter, right? I think it will matter more for, you're talking about Ryan Wingo, for instance, right? Ryan Wingo's a local-ish player, right? He's a Midwest kid.
Yeah.
He looks at he knows who Justin Scott is. Heck yeah, he knows who Justin Scott is. Darius Hayes might know who Justin Scott is, but he's a Florida kid, right? Yeah. That one won't matter as much to him. Elijah Rushing is from Arizona. That might not matter as much for him. Mike Matthews is a Georgia kid. That might not matter as much for him. But for some players, it will matter tremendously. Like Ryan Wingo knows who Justin Scott is, right? The other kids in Chicago know who Justin Scott is. The kids in Ohio know who Justin Scott is. The kids in Michigan know who Justin Scott is. The kids in the area, I think, will more be drawn to it because they know who that guy is, right? They know who Justin Scott is. All the other players, they can look at the profile and do all that type of stuff, but we know recruiting is so built off of relationships, man.
Yeah.
I mean, Sean, who's been one of the biggest players in the getting Justin Scott to South Bend thing outside of the coaches? It's been Cam Williams.
Williams.
Because he knows him. He knows Justin personally. He knows him. If Notre Dame decides to push for Marquise Lightfoot, Cam Williams is going to be involved in that recruitment. That's just point blank to it, right? That's how relationships are built.
Darian Dupree. All you just named the names. Yes,
they know each other, man.
Yes.
They know each other. You don't think it matters? I'm beyond folks. You don't think that it matters that Notre Dame just signed Christian Gray and Jeremiah Love in the 2023 class to Ryan Wingo? You don't think that matters? I know it matters because I know those guys talk a lot. It matters. Does it mean that's where he's going? It's not what it means. But it does mean that it matters. It helps. That relationship is a thing. So I think that if you get Justin Scott, he's a pillar to your class. And it helps you from perception nationally with guys like Darius Hayes, Elijah Rushing. Still unlikely that you get a guy like Elijah Rushing. But it's a big deal. It's a very big deal for Notre Dame. And Notre Dame hasn't recruited Chicago as much as they probably should have over the last few years. You got to keep the elite players in Chicago at home, man. You just got to. Can't let them leave. The elite players in Indiana and Chicago can never leave if you want them, right? They can never leave. Losing Justin Scott to Georgia would be that's a bad loss, man. You can't lose them. Can't lose them at the end of the day. So it's a pillar. It's a pillar for a lot of reasons. We had Jay Henry to continue the Justin Scott conversation, Sean. He said, if Justin Scott commits and stays in the class, how does Marcus Freeman view that win for Al Washington? Does he give him credit or does he still need to see more?
I know we need to see more.
I
can't speak for Marcus Freeman, but I know both of us need to see more. I know that for a fact. That's not enough. That's a darn good start, though. That's a darn good start to turning things around. Darn good start. And if you can fill that with some more additions in the 24 class and top that off with the development of the sophomores and the juniors in the season, hey, I'll change my tune. You'll shut my mouth.
Yes. But also, Sean, I mean, so we talked about this the other day. If Notre Dame lands Justin Scott, I give more credit to Marcus Freeman than Al Washington. That's just me. It's just based upon everything we've heard. I mean, it's the reality, right?
I'll be the nice guy.
You can be the nice guy.
I'll grade it on the curve. You go ahead. You're the teacher, so you're doing you.
Grade it on, yeah, man. You throw your weights in there. You grade on the curve. You can do whatever you want. All right.
Right.
I do need to see more though. Like if they landed both the Smith twins, for instance, right? If they landed both the Smith twins, I know that Al Washington has been heavily involved in that recruitment. So I'll give him a good job. Good job on that one. That's fantastic. If you get another big-time defensive line recruit that Al Washington's the main recruiter for, absolutely. But the reality is that until Marcus Freeman had to step in on this one, man, it was trending in a bad direction for a while. One that you have said, and I will say this on the show because it's not like, we're not throwing shade on anybody.
No.
They made it harder than it had to be.
Facts.
They made it harder than it had to be.
Facts.
Who made it harder on himself, Sean? Al made it harder on themselves. I mean, it's point blank to it, man. It just didn't have to be this hard. But ultimately, they might recover, which is great. But don't give full credit to Al Washington. And if I'm Marcus Freeman, I'm saying, Al, I'm your head coach, man. I'm here to help, obviously. Whatever you do directly, reflects on me. So I gave you the assist on that one. But need to see more? No doubt. No doubt you need to see more. I don't think that's unrealistic or unreasonable either.
We both agree.
Yes.
That there's more to be seen. Absolutely.
Yes. No doubt. No doubt. I know I'm harping on too hard. I need to stop. Next question from Nick Lane, who said, Mailbag, any headway with Corey Smith out of Wisconsin? Nick, I think I put something on I put it on my mailbag from last week. So there was decent momentum early. I just don't think that relationship is continuing to build much. I think there's a little bit of a stall for whatever reason. So I think you're seeing other running backs like Darian Dupree get added to the board. And I think Notre Dame's interested in bringing a second running back in the 2024 class to pair with Aeneas Williams. I was hoping that it may be Corey Smith. I just don't think he's incredibly likely right now. Does that mean that won't change? It's possible, but I just don't think they have a lot of traction with Corey Smith as it currently sits. So it's kind of the latest on Corey Smith. Going to move now, Sean, to Seth Clark, who says, Mailbag, who are your underrated defensive prospects in the 2024 recruiting class? We already told you that, sir. I don't know why I signed that one, but Seth, I'll say this, though. Next Monday, we'll be doing the offensive side of the football. Tune back to the beginning of the show if you missed our underrated conversation. All right, Sean, let's pull up this question from Garland Doxy, who says, is it possible Justin Scott took that tweet down because he knew schools were going to start pressing him? He isn't big on all the recruiting for the mailbag. What do you think about that, Sean? That's interesting. Maybe he doesn't want to be pressed as hard. I mean, I haven't really thought about that, but that's a decent, I don't know.
It doesn't even matter. Same tune I kept last week, I'm keeping this week. It's a tweet. When I saw that his tweets and his replies to the Notre Dame 24 commits were still up and continuing, that's all that mattered to me. It didn't matter one bit. He told me that he was pretty much done.
Yeah.
Right. And Georgia coming in wasn't about to change that. If anything, it was going to put him in a position to have to visit Georgia really fast and still make a decision because he's ready to be done. That's it. So I didn't even ask him why he took the tweet down.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. Because I don't really think it changed anything. Like once he told me nothing had changed, that's all I needed to hear.
That's all you need to hear.
That's all I needed to hear.
Love it. All right. We don't have a ton of time left, but I'm going to roll through a few of these and knock out as many as I can. Nick Lane asked, do we have a chance with Caleb Beasley? Nick, a chance? I mean, yeah, you have a chance. He's committed to the University of Tennessee. He's a very talented cornerback in the 2024 class. Notre Dame just came back to see him, though, this past week, Sean, and I know, or 2 weeks ago, I guess, a week and a half ago, whatever. He had a basketball game. Marcus Freeman came down to watch him play basketball, and Caleb Beasley tweeted about it before he even ended up coming, right? So I think there's still intrigue there, man. I know they built a pretty good relationship with some of the other guys at the Irish Invasion this past year. CJ Carr was there, Jack Larson, Cam Williams. I know Caleb Beasley was kind of in that group a little bit as far as they got along really well. So, I mean, ultimately, you have to beat the SEC. You have to beat the home state school that he's committed to in Tennessee. But there's a possibility. I just, we'll see how likely it is.
I think Caleb Beasley, he was at the Irish Invasion, has a very strong relationship with Marcus Freeman and the staff. That still exists. The fact that he was excited about Marcus Freeman coming to see him shows what Notre Dame means to him. And I think him committing to where he committed to was just the vibe of last season. It was a vibe. Like Tennessee was the belle of the ball for a long time.
They just had one of their best seasons in how long?
And, going to campus, and he was there for the Alabama game. So, I mean, that's enough said. You get caught up in that vibe, and like you and the guys that you know around the state say, man, you know what? We're just going to go ahead and commit, But, yeah, you still talk to them because Tennessee, there's no guarantee they're going to have a good season this year.
Yep.
Joe Milton's their quarterback. And behind him is Nico. And I think Joe Milton is going to play better. I don't know if he's going to play a Hendon Hooker pre-injury level.
Probably not. Yeah.
And he doesn't have Jalen anymore at wide receiver. So they don't have that big time threat. But I'm sure they're recruiting wide receivers. But the season's going to be different. It's just going to be a different season. And we'll see. If they don't have such a Cinderella season and Notre Dame goes to the college football playoff, how does that change things for Caleb Beasley?
Yeah. And if you're Notre Dame, you have to stay on Caleb Beasley because he's still talking to you, and he's a potential elite prospect, man. He's a really talented football player. So keep that relationship building.
If they add him,
Sean, he might be the best corner you've had in 3 cycles, and you've recruited that position very, very well. Like Caleb Beasley's a stud, man. If he ends up at Notre Dame or not, he is a stud. Very good football player. We had this question, Sean. I'll let you bang this one out because I don't honestly want to answer this. From Roderick Blackman, who says, is Notre Dame recruiting another quarterback for 2024, or is it CJ Carr or bust?
I don't know. Do you believe in the Alabama model of getting multiple quarterbacks in each class?
I think Alabama only believe in that model because the one kid might never play football, Dylan Lonergan. So
okay. Yeah. Well, look, if you have your quarterback, you have your quarterback.
Yeah.
That's it. Like just months ago, we didn't even have a quarterback in the 23 class.
Right.
And we're frightened to death that it might end up that way. So, no,
Yes.
I think they're on to the 25 class as far as the quarterbacks, whether it be a Diabell or Diabell's 26, right?
He's 26, yeah.
Yeah, he's 26. Or Bryce J. Underwood and some of the other kids in that 25 class. I have to send you the film of this kid locally from 25. I want to get your thoughts on him. He's
an Illinois kid?
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the thing. Brian and Malik have already seen his film. I want to meet the offensive coordinator. I'm like, I don't even want to talk to the kid. I want to meet the coordinator just based off his film. Like, yo, this kid is a sophomore. You asked him to do this as a sophomore?
It's wild.
Like all of this? Like, okay. All right. But yeah, I think they're done. They're on the 25.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can tell you for certain that they are done. They are done. CJ Carr is their guy, and they're very happy with him, and there's no reason to take a second quarterback in the class, and they're already recruiting 2025. Like you said, Sean, they just offered Antoine Hill Jr. out of the state of Georgia.
Right.
Who's a really talented quarterback. I mean, they're on the 2025 for quarterback recruiting. No doubt about it. We're going to go to Milton Fan, who said, Ryan and Sean, what mistakes do most fans and analysts make when rating recruits and recruiting classes? I mean, for recruits, I would say.
I'll say this.
Yeah.
The biggest mistake, in my opinion, is being overwhelmed by how dominant a kid looks, and you're not looking at the nuances of the position they play.
Sure. Yep.
Just looking at the fact that kids just physically dominate, but you're not looking at their feet, their technique, some of the other things that are the nuances that are going to be the separators at the next level, because those kids aren't going to be able to just come in and physically do what they do at the high school level on the college level. That's probably the one thing that causes people to make mistakes. They get wowed by dominance, and it's like, yeah, but especially along the line.
That's a good one. That's a good one. For me, Sean, I think a big one for me is that I feel like people aren't consistent with how they evaluate players, in the sense of, like, if you're a guy that really pushes towards the upside a lot of a player, that's fine, right? But be consistent with that, right? If you're a guy that pushes towards the upside of a guy, then you shouldn't rank one guy that is a long way to go really high and then another that is just not your cup of tea for whatever reason down. So stay consistent, man. If you're a guy that loves the floor more than the ceiling, that's fine, but stay consistent to it. I think there's a lack of inconsistency. We were talking the other day. It's like the kid that's going to the big wide receiver that is going to Nebraska, that's an in-state kid, Malachi Coleman. All right. They have him ranked super high, most outlets, but then a lot don't have Braylon James ranked really high. And I'm like, if you love the upside of Malachi Coleman, why do you not love the upside of Braylon James? Like, that's inconsistency. Why is that inconsistent? So I think that honestly, that's the biggest thing for me, is that there are biases that everybody has when they evaluate players. And we have to be aware of our biases to be the best possible evaluators that we can be. But for me, like, that's the biggest inconsistency I see, is that people lose sight of what they like and stick to it. They kind of trend too far to the right or too far to the left. So I think just being consistent is the biggest thing for me. All right. We're going to end this one here, Sean, because we got to get rocking and rolling here. This last one from Zach Martin said, if Notre Dame landed Smith, that's Jacob Smith and Jared Smith twins, Justin Scott, Bryce Young, and a Viper, who would be your last reasonable piece for Viper, for one, and how would you grade that class? So most likely guy for Viper, Sean, I guess is a good way to start. Who would be your ideal Viper in the class?
From what's left over? Oh, man.
The first guy that popped into my head, and I know he's not technically a Viper on the board, but Darius Hayes would be my Viper, right? Out of Marco in Florida.
Yeah.
That would be him.
I could agree. I could agree with that. I think that would be the one that makes the most sense based upon, he's just too athletic, too good, and you can use him in that position. So, yeah.
Well, Sean, to finish this up, then let me ask you: if I told you that you have Jacob and Jared Smith, you have Justin Scott, you have Bryce Young, and you have an Darius Hayes as your 5-man defensive line class, let's say, what would you grade that out as?
I would give it B+, A-. If you throw in the IMG kid, I would give you an A.
You want the IMG kid? I would honestly, I would probably give that whole an A-, honestly. Actually, no, I would give that an A. I really would, man, because the Darius Hayes is a top 50 kid. You have the Smith twins
that's my fault. Yeah. I forgot to add them in my thinking. I'm sorry. You're right. Okay, A, and then I can get greedy and still add the IMG kid.
Love it. I think we're on the same page there. It would be a really good defensive line class for what it is. Mm-hmm. That's going to conclude the mailbag section of the Irish Breakdown podcast. Want to thank everybody for taking some time with us today. Before you leave, if you could hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, hit that notification bell, share this podcast. 5-star reviews on your favorite podcast platform are very much appreciated. Like this video. Please go like it right now. Helps with the algorithm and everything. Go sign up at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So from Ryan, that is Sean. Thank you so much for joining the Irish Breakdown podcast. This is the Notre Dame Recruiting Hour.